Karine, and good morning, everyone. As the father of the Blue Card, as I've been called, it's been a privilege over the past year to see my child grow up. But as with most children, it's been promising and fulfilling, but also not without troubles and some challenges. And if the trialogues are the teenage years, there's definitely some challenges ahead still. Well, I have a distinguished audience in front of me of practitioners, academics, and experts. So I would like to, before I start, ask a little question. Who is familiar with the Blue Card here? Can you show a bit? So I can assume that most of you know the Blue Card. And who considers the current Blue Card an insufficient instrument and considers that that it has challenges and that a review is needed? There's also still a number of hands. Okay, well, that helps with the first chapter that I wanted to address. I still need to convince some people, it seems, but there's some people who are convinced already. So, well, I'm going to talk about the challenges of the current Blue Card. So let me just skip on to the next slide. So first, why a new Blue Card? Then I'll talk about the main novelties of the Commission proposal, and then what will happen next. So what are the challenges of the current Blue Card? Why have we embarked on this journey, this reform of the Blue Card? So we've looked at the EU's needs, the labor shortages and so forth, and then we looked at how the EU currently is doing and how we can address the challenges of the future. And then, well, the third point is not complete. It should say, is the current Blue Card adequate to address those needs of the EU? So what we did, we did an extensive impact assessment with this proposal. It's all online. It's up to 500 pages. We did a large public consultation. We consulted widely with stakeholders, and what we found is, I'll summarize it in a few slides, just the key points. Well, currently the EU is already faced with a number of shortages that cannot be addressed with the current EU labor force. So, for instance, the top 10 of bottleneck vacancies in the EU at the moment already has 4 highly skilled professions in the top 10, which means that those professions cannot be filled with the existing labor force in the EU. So it's not about retraining and so forth, that is also necessary, but there's just not enough people to fill these vacancies. On top of that, the EU is also faced with in the future with demographic challenges in the next decades. So we know that our population is rapidly aging. We know that the labor force will be shrinking, and that the old age dependency rate, so the number of people who work and pay for the pensions basically, is also increasing. So at the moment there's 4 people working for every retired person. By 2060 it's 2 persons for every retired person. So we need to address certain challenges in the EU. So we've had a look also at future shortages in the EU. This is a very difficult exercise, but my colleagues in DG Employment and of CVDFOP have put some numbers together, and so it shows that the labor force is projected to change. And what you see on this graph is that the low, medium, and high skilled people in the labor force are expected to change. So the demand for these skill levels for the low skill jobs is projected to decrease by 24% between 2012 and 2025. So that means 11.5 million less people in the EU would be needed in the low skilled sector, but the medium skilled, there we're talking about an increase of 3 million or about 3%, and in the high skilled an increase of 15 million or 23%. So there's a shift in the labor market happening, and it means that there's going to be an increasing need for highly skilled workers. A couple of examples of sector-specific shortages in the ICT sector. About 100,000 jobs per year are out there, are published by employers and cannot be filled. There's just not enough people with the right skills. So these jobs remain unfilled, which of course is a hamper on growth for companies who need these people for their day-to-day business. Also in the healthcare sector, about 1 million highly skilled healthcare workers are projected to I think something. About 1 million healthcare workers are projected as a shortfall over a decade up to 2020. So that is a very brief and incomplete sketch of a few sectors, but it gives you an idea. So then we looked at how is the EU doing in attracting these highly skilled. What you see in this graph is basically a compilation of Eurostat figures on the national schemes for highly skilled workers in the EU 25 that apply the blue card as well. So that's the red bar at the bottom. We see that it increases slightly over the years. Then you see in 2012 the blue card coming in, and we see a sharp increase over the next couple of years. And then the green graph is the 3 countries that did not participate in the legal migration instruments of the EU, so the UK, Ireland, and Denmark. What we see is that there's been an increase over the past more or less decade. There's only the figures up to 2015 are available. But if we add up all the numbers for 2015, for instance, we get to just under 43,000 in the EU 25 and just over 52,000 in the EU 28. If you put that next to, that is the number of highly skilled workers that the EU is attracting. If you put that next to the needs, then you see that it's by far too low to fill these needs, and especially if you look at the future projected needs, we're not there, and so the EU needs to step up its game towards the future to attract more highly skilled workers if we want to fill these shortages. So, in brief, why do we think a revision is needed? That's based on our research and the impact assessment and the public consultation. We concluded that the blue card currently is underused and it is too exclusive, so not enough people are able to get one, and it is bureaucratic. There's also the problem that there's not one EU blue card, but there's in fact 25, because there's a very divergent implementation. Member states have a lot of choices in the blue card, so you don't have one set of rules across the 25 countries. Also, the parallel national schemes that are allowed next to the blue card create a situation where you have many different sets of rules and procedures and conditions next to each other. So you have dozens of rules for the same group of people in the EU. So that's, in our conclusion, is unnecessarily complex and confusing. But also the blue card itself, as I already mentioned, is intrinsically a weak instrument in our findings. And we conclude that, in fact, by acting together, we can regain our competitive advantage over the competition. Instead of having a fragmented landscape, having a more clear branding instrument towards the outside world is something that we think can make the EU as a whole more attractive, and the blue card can help with that. So just briefly to show you the latest available numbers on the blue cards. The vast majority is going to Germany. Germany has made the blue card its main highly skilled immigration scheme. About 85% at the moment are going there. So it is a quite unbalanced picture. So let me now get, after the picture of a very brief picture of the current situation, to the novelties of the proposal to address these shortcomings. But I have to point out that the proposal does not only address the shortcomings of the current blue card, but of the overall system. That was the goal at the outset. So, first of all, we've introduced harmonization, simplification, and efficiency. We wanted to make a truly EU-wide scheme with a much higher branding potential and visibility towards talented people around the world, so that from the perspective of India, China, the US, or elsewhere, the EU becomes a more simple and clear landscape in terms of immigration, instead of the current fragmented landscape that I already described. In the proposal, member states are given less leeway for diverging national implementations of the blue card, and national schemes for the same target group are not allowed anymore under the proposal. So it would streamline the situation, harmonize and simplify, but we also intend to reduce complexity and red tape, so also the efficiency is increased in our opinion. Of course, some of these steps are questioned by some. But we think that this is necessary to counter the efficiencies of the current overall system, the inefficiencies of the current overall immigration system for the highly skilled, but also because with what we think we have put on the table, many of the other systems would not be needed anymore because the proposal introduces a higher level of inclusiveness for the applicants, but also a higher level of flexibility for member states to calibrate and fine-tune it at the national level. So let me get a bit to this fine-tuning. So the admission conditions have been made more flexible and more inclusive. It remains a scheme for the highly skilled, though. The job contract, it remains a demand-driven system, so the job contract or a job offer is always necessary. We've reduced the minimum duration of the initial job contract from 12 to 6 months to align with labor market realities and many of the national schemes, in fact. Also, the salary threshold that is in the current blue card at the level of 1.5 times the average gross salary has been lowered to for member states to set in a range between 1.0 and 1.4 times the average salary. This is also to align with labor market realities, and it's one of the factors that made the current blue card very exclusive. We've also introduced facilitation for recent graduates. People who just start on the labor market often do not make the same wages yet as people with more experience. So there's a lower salary threshold of 80% of the general one for those people. And for workers in certain shortage occupations where there's particular needs in the economy, there's also this lower threshold. We've also introduced an equivalence between professional experience and formal qualifications, because in the modern labor market, often more and more employers need specific skills and specific experience, and not necessarily the formal qualifications that are attested by a university degree. So we've also tried to increase the value of the validation of experience. So when I described the system as also more flexible for the member states, that's because member states can adapt the blue card nationally to their national needs and circumstances. It's the member states who set the salary threshold levels in the proposal within the range provided in the proposal from 1.0 to 1.4. The member states decide which jobs are the shortest, are in need and are the shortest lists. So they decide for which particular jobs there's a lower threshold applicable. But member states can also still invoke labor market tests to protect their labor markets when needed. The labor market test mechanism has been changed, but it's still there. And when it's needed, for instance, in the cases of a high level of unemployment, then member states can activate it and use it. And finally, also the treaty-based mechanism of the volumes of admission always still stands. So member states always have the possibility to set specific quotas. That is something that has not been touched. So let me show you briefly why we, for instance, lowered the initial contract duration from 12 to 6 months. This graph shows you the length of validity of permits, national permits that have been issued for newcomers, for highly skilled newcomers in the EU over the years. And you see that, in fact, the red graph are all permits that are issued for a period between 6 and 11 months under national permits. So a large part of the national permits are given for a shorter period than 12 months. So in order to be able to capture this group, we had to lower the duration of the initial contract, and this is also something as in line with labor market realities. Often employers first give a trial contract of say 9 months and then extend the contract and give a permanent contract. That's something that people are used to in the labor market these days. So this is aligning it with the reality. So let me show you then how hard it is to meet actually the current blue card threshold. What you see in the little blue bars are the percentage of people, full-time employees with tertiary education, so not the entire population, tertiary education, who are able in the member states that you see to make the salary threshold at the moment. Sorry, the blue bars is the total population. So And then the yellow bars is those with tertiary education. So the blue bars, you see that in many of the member states, it's between 0 and 30% that's of people who are able to make the salary threshold. If you then look at the tertiary educated workers, then it goes up to 30, between less than 10% and up to 50% in some member states. Portugal and Italy are a special case that it's because they actually apply currently a blue threshold that is too low. That's why they're a bit jumping out. But in fact, a large part of the target group cannot make the salary threshold. So if you see the yellow bars, that is the percentage of people who are highly skilled, highly educated, in fact, who can make the blue card, and everybody who's outside of that group cannot make the blue card threshold. So this is the target group, and the vast majority of these people with those education levels cannot make the current threshold. And this is based on the numbers of the national population in the member states. Then if you look at recent graduates, the red bars are again the tertiary educated people in the member states, and then the yellow dots are the percentage of people between 25 and 30 who are tertiary educated who currently can make the salary threshold. And as you can see, the large group of those cannot make the salary thresholds. Only 20% or less of those between 25 and 30 can make the salary thresholds at the moment. So that's why we also find the facilitation necessary for recent graduates. Then we did the simulation of what would happen if we would decrease the salary threshold. So here you see the blue bars if we would decrease it from 1.5 to 1.2, and the red bars if we would decrease it from 1.5 to 1.0. And then you see the increase in percentage points of tertiary educated people who can make the salary threshold. So there you see an important rise there. If you go from 1.5 to 1.2, on average it goes up 18 percentage points, and if you go down to 1.0, it goes on average 34 percentage points up. So then a larger group of people is able to make the salary threshold then. Of course, this is one of the conditions of the blue card, but it's an important condition that is quite exclusive at the moment. So let me now get to the scope of the proposal. We've changed from highly qualified to highly skilled workers to emphasize more that professional experience is recognized and valued more in the proposal, and we've made it in the proposal equal to educational qualifications, and this change of terminology is meant to reflect that. We've also extended the scope to beneficiaries of international protection who are residing in the member states and have the right already to work under the asylum acquis. They will be given access to the scheme as long as they fulfill the regular conditions. This means that at the moment these people cannot apply for Blue Card. They're excluded from the scope. They are just not allowed to. But by doing this, they highly skilled beneficiary of international protections can apply for Blue Card in the member states where they have protection and already have labor market access. By doing that, they can be more visible to employers. There could be a less stigmatizing effect. That could be another effect. But the important element is that they also have access to the labor market of other member states. So a highly skilled beneficiary who has certain skill sets that are not in demand in the member state in which the person has protection can move to the member state where his or her skills are in demand. That would be beneficial for the person and for the host society on both sides. In addition, we've also extended the Blue Card scope to third country national family members of EU citizens. At the moment, they're also excluded. These people already have their status and rights under the free movement acquis, but they are always dependent of the EU citizen with whom they join. At the moment, they cannot reside nor even travel on their own. So by giving them access to the EU Blue Card, if they get a highly skilled job, get an EU Blue Card, they're able to travel and reside, if needed, in other member states autonomously. The rights of the EU Blue Card have also been improved. We have given faster access to long-term residence status. It's an important factor of attractiveness that comes out of all surveys that we've done. The flexible access in the current Blue Card after 5 years of that can be accumulated in different member states, that's been kept. But we've added that you can also accumulate periods that you've held other permits than the Blue Card. So if you've been a student in a member state before and then moved to another member state and started working there, these periods can be accumulated. And then we've also introduced a new faster access after 3 years for Blue Card holders who stayed in the same member state. Some member states are already doing this. Germany, for instance, gives access to long-term residents, national permanent residents, for Blue Card holders after 33 months and even 21 months if they speak a certain level of German. So after less than 2 years, these people have a permanent status in Germany. And so in fact, that's very beneficial for these people, but they lose certain rights under the Blue Card. The mobility rights, they lose then if they go for a national permanent residence. So that's why we also thought this is an important element. We've also gave broader labor market access. The current rules are quite complex, and the Blue Card is effectively often tied to the employer. This has been clarified, and it's been made easier for Blue Card holders to have access to highly skilled jobs other than the one that they first came for, as long as they continue to fulfill the conditions. And we also allow for the right to self-employed activity on the side. So that means as long as the person continues to fulfill the Blue Card conditions, continues to work in a regular job, if in the weekend or overnight they do other things, they develop apps or do other activities, their entrepreneurial talent should not be limited by a legal gray zone that exists at the moment. So that's also something that we've introduced. Family members, we've improved their rights as well. It allows the family members to accompany the Blue Card immediately with no extra processing time. With the current Blue Card, there can be a up to 6 months delay for family members to join. And also the labor market access for family members has been broadened. Not only the highly skilled segment, which is in the current Blue Card, but all skill levels are accessible to the family members because the spouse does not necessarily have the same skill level as the Blue Card holder. We've also introduced faster, more flexible procedures. First of all, applications are not only possible from the outside the territory. That's the general rule in the current Blue Card, but by default, the applications are allowed when a person is legally present in the EU. So that means that anyone who's present in the territory in a legal way can apply for a Blue Card and does not have to go back to their country of origin to submit an application, which is in the current Blue Card the case and often leads to basically silly situations. The maximum processing time has been lowered from 90 to 60 days. This is the maximum. Member states can always go lower, and several member states do it much faster. In the case of mobility, this is even 30 days. And member states are also encouraged to be more flexible when recognizing qualifications. If the qualifications are if the job requires a general bachelor level degree, that does not, then the qualifications do not have to be checked in detail over a lengthy process. It can be just checked. If the person has a bachelor degree, fine. This is something that we encourage member states to do, and that's actually already possible in the current Blue Card, but we encourage member states to do this more. Besides that, there's also a trusted employer scheme for employers who fulfill certain conditions and are also subject to controls. They can apply for a status which allows them to have their workers even faster and more easily admitted and processed. That is built on experiences in certain member states who do this already, and we have very positive experiences with this. Then the element what the Blue Card brings, which national schemes cannot bring, of course, is the inter-EU mobility, which we also try to enhance. This is one of the most attractive features of the Blue Card. And we think that in a single market that the EU is, there's a clear business need for being able to send highly skilled employees to other member states for shorter and longer periods. That's why the current Blue Card, which is actually has very limited facilitation for mobility, and in fact you have to apply for a new Blue Card, and fulfilling all the conditions again in the second member state. We've facilitated this First of all, there's a new concept of short-term business trips. Those are business trips of under 90 days in any 180-day period to align with the Schengen mobility. We've provided more clarity by introducing a definition of those business trips. So there's a list of activities that are allowed as in other member states for short periods. So that can be business meetings, negotiations, attending training, doing audits, and this has been made easier. Currently, this is a bit of a gray zone across the member states, and it gives a lot of compliance headaches for employers. Also, then moving to a second member state, if you get another job, or if your employer sends you long-term to another member state and you sign a new contract there, you can have easier mobility under the new Blue Card after 12 months instead of the 18 months in the current Blue Card. The processing time, this is a person who's already in the labor market, as the employer has a need for this person somewhere else, so the processing time has been lowered. Not all the criteria are checked again, because we consider that if the qualifications, for instance, have already been checked, the second member state does not have to go through this whole process again. They should trust the assessment of the first member state and also this assessment of the employer, and this person has basically been working already for at least a year in the EU. Also, some other facilitations, some other proofs do not need to be submitted again, but the national salary threshold always needs to be met. And there's also the facilitation that this person can immediately start working in the second member state. So those are the main novelties of the proposal. So let me now briefly touch on what will happen next, if I have some time. Yeah. Well, basically, at the moment, we are a year after, just a few days over a year after we adopted the proposal. We've had in the council, I'll show a slide a bit of the process in the council and the parliament. In the council, there's been 11 meetings at working party expert level discussing this proposal. There's been 3 councillor meetings, and then there's also been last Monday a first COREPER meeting at ambassador level to discuss this proposal. So discussions are getting quite mature, and the proposal has advanced a lot since a year. On the Parliament side, also the Parliament is setting its position. At this very moment, in fact, there's the vote in Libe to determine the negotiation mandate for the Parliament side, and we hope that the current presidency can still get a mandate on the Council side so that the trilogues can start soon. I'll leave it to Anna to get a bit more into those aspects, what's been happening in the past year. But from the Commission perspective, well, I can say that we do regret a bit the direction the preparatory discussions have gone. We see a bit of a repeat of the first Blue Cards. The proposal on the Council side has been emptied of a certain level of its added value. That's a number of member states who have wanted it this way. I can also say that other member states do support the more ambitious Blue Cards. That is, but we as a Commission remain hopeful, and I see my child also as a hopeful future. And I hope that throughout the trilogue stage, also with the Parliament, which does seem to be adopting a position that's closer to the Commission proposal and even goes further on some points, we hope to still be able to improve the Blue Card and have an ambitious directive that can face the future challenges of the EU. Thank you.